Hey everybody, it's Kneecap here, and in this video I'm going to be giving some suggestions to make delves a little bit better in Season 2 than they are in Season 1. Full disclosure, I think delves are great in Season 1 already, but of course, it's a brand new thing. It's the first season of delves ever, and of course we can make improvements. I'm sure there's already improvements in line to come out that I don't know about yet, that nobody knows about yet, and maybe some of these will be in there, which would be great. But I wanted to just talk about what I would do to kind of make delves an even better experience for players, for solo players, for open world players, all that kind of thing, which is what delves were supposed to be for. And we can definitely make improvements for it to make them feel a little bit better for that, not the suggested, but the target player base for these things. Now, of course, you might have your own suggestions for these. Feel free to comment those below. These are just kind of what I'm thinking of right now after I went back and revisited delves after not doing them too much since the beginning of the season. So recently I made a video about the changes coming in delves where you can get gilded crests from doing delves, which I think is amazing, by the way. Please keep that. We definitely want that. If you don't know already, basically you can get gilded crests supposedly from doing tier 11 delves, which is like the max delve, and then also from doing the maps that you find. So like every once in a while you'll find a map, it gives you a buff, and the next delve you do, there's an extra chest there, and that chest can have like a really nice piece of gear in it. And in this next season, there'll also be gilded crests in it as well. Probably a low amount. That's kind of like the theory is going to be a pretty low amount is how many is in there, but at least you can get gilded crests doing this, and that's kind of cool in my opinion. I think that's really good. I like that. However, in that video, I got multiple comments about how difficult tier 11 delves still are this far into the season. Now, I haven't done a tier 11 delve since I was much lower item level. So I am now 637. Sometimes I log in, it says 638. So I'm somewhere around 637.5 or somewhere very close to that, right? Is my item level. And so I'm like, I'm going to go back into tier 11 delves because I assumed that with more eye level, some of these issues would kind of fix themselves. Now, it's also worth saying that a solo player is not going to have 637 item level or the equivalent of it next season, right? That's from doing Mythic Raid and, Mythic Pluses and getting my vault item from doing plus 10s and higher Mythic Pluses. So a solo player is likely not going to have that quite item level. Now with the Gilded Crest, they could actually work their way up towards that item level in the next season, but it's not going to be an expected item level to have. So the completion for the tier 11s needs to be much lower than that, the equivalent of that. Like probably honestly, you probably want to be able to complete it at like 620s, low 620s would be my suggestion to be able to complete the 11s, the equivalent of that into the next patch, because you can get there by upgrading your stuff. That you get from doing delve stuff only. So as long as you can get it from doing delves only, I think it should be completable. Now, when I did a tier 11, that's about where my item level was at the beginning of the season, and I did one or two just to kind of see what it was like, and I'm like, okay, this is really hard, but I did complete it. I completed the ones that I did, and I just kind of didn't touch delves much after that. I kind of finished out my delver's journey, and then just kind of went along doing the season, raiding, and everything else. So I go back into that after getting the comments that how difficult it is, thinking, okay, well, let me see what it is with my gear. Because if it's still really hard with my gear, then of course it's too hard. And I would say it was overall pretty dang difficult, but not difficult in a fun way. So the bosses weren't too difficult for me because I have all this gear, right? But the trash is just meleeing me and just chunking me and almost killing me at any moment. Like if they get a crit, I might just die at any second, which is insane. Now, this is something that was brought up at the beginning of the season. This was brought up around the time when I was going into that plus 11 and trying it out, right? A bunch of high-end players, I know like Dratnos is one of them, were making videos saying, hey, this stuff is just white hitting way too freaking hard. Now I'm like, well, maybe with more item level, that'll kind of correct itself. Maybe they'll do a fix of it. It's still fairly early in the season at that time. So I'm going back in there now, and I'm like, oh no, this stuff is still chunking way, way too hard. So you got to get rid of that fake difficulty in the delves, in my opinion. Give the mobs more abilities that you have to deal with, perhaps. Now they're already set up in a way where you very rarely have to pull more than like 4 mobs tops, and a lot of times you only have to pull like 1 or 2 mobs at a time in the delves. So maybe just giving them more abilities that you can try to deal with. Of course, that would require you as a solo player to only pull 1 or 2 mobs if they have a bunch of abilities. But I love being able to outplay something. You can't really outplay them just meleeing you, except for kiting it out, of course. And so that's what I had to resort to many times when going back and doing the tier 11s, was just kind of like kiting them around and like, oh, please don't kill me. I'm just going to kite you down this bridge and then jump off and you have to run around and hopefully Bran does some damage to you while that's happening. I will say it did help a lot when I switched Bran to healer mode from damage mode, because at least then when they chunk me down, I could like run over the potions and keep doing damage. Because what happens is, even if you are a class that can heal yourself like a Rat Paladin with Wog, is you're using your Wog to heal yourself and then you're not doing any damage to the mobs. And so you're kind of like in this loop where they're just chunking you down. You're trying to keep up healing yourself, but you're never actually killing them because you're never able to actually press your damage buttons to kill them. And so that's a terrible loop to be stuck in. It's not fun at all. And so that definitely needs fixed. I don't know how you have to go about fixing it. The difficulty overall is fine, in my opinion. I could do it at the item level that probably should be doing it at. And you know, so it's doable. And if you're something like a hunter, which I did some delves on, was my hunter, and it's extremely easy, even with no gear, to do delves on a hunter, because the pets are just so good in those delves, but the way the mechanics are. It's quite easy. So depending on your spec, it's easier than others. But for melee, for people who are taking these chunky blows and you can't really do much about it, other than kite it out, which is not fun gameplay, if I'm just being honest. Yeah, that definitely needs to be fixed. That needs to be fixed day 1 of season 2. Day 1 of season 2, white hits should just be normal white hits. Yes, if you have 4 mobs hitting you, like, for 5 to 10 seconds and you're not doing anything to stop them, you're not stunning them, you're not kiting at all, you're not healing yourself, you're not doing anything to stop them, yes, of course the white hits should add up. But they're just like, I shouldn't even say a little bit, they're quite a bit too strong. They're almost like 100% too strong or something. Like, instead of 1 white hit hitting you for, let's say, 30% of your health, maybe the white hit hits you for 10% of your health or something like that, right? That way, if there's 3 of them hitting you, then 3 of them are chunking you, but at least it's not 1 solo mob chunking you. And so I think that's the kind of stuff that needs to be looked into very severely. I love the idea. And so we didn't see much tuning on delves throughout the season, a little bit early on, and that's about it. But what I would really love to see is just make sure all the bosses are fair. Some of the bosses, for a Ret Paladin, I didn't feel like any of the bosses were unfair, even on a tier 11. I felt like I could deal with them. I had ways to deal with them. And if I died, then I was like, okay, well, I need to play this way instead and figure it out. But I could also see some specs maybe not having all the optionality like a Ret Paladin has, especially with healing myself. So I think all bosses should be looked at is to keep them similar difficulty as they are now, but maybe just more ways to deal with certain mechanics than currently exists. Or maybe Bran can have an ability to deal with the mechanic that you don't. So for example, there's multiple bosses that do a ability and they'll put a dot on you and the dot slows you. Well, I can Blessing of Freedom and like immune it, and other classes can do that too, and other specs and other classes can do that as well, without Blessing of Freedom, but with their own version of that spell. But not every spec has that. So how does that spec deal with it? I don't even technically know. And so maybe Bran can have that for you, where if you're slowed, Bran puts Blessing of Freedom on you or something like that. Of course, then a Paladin, or other class that has Blessing of Freedom, they can just choose something else. And of course, that's a benefit to them still, to be able to choose a different ability. But it gives some optionality there. So that's something I would look at as well. Maybe making Bran and any future companions in the future of delves to have a little bit more utility as far as dealing with boss mechanics that your spec or class is not equipped to deal with. So I definitely heard you guys when I was talking about the upgrades. It is, tier 11s are a little bit too difficult. I do think tier 11s should have better rewards going into the next as well. Like, tier 11 is no joke. Maybe the first tier 11 you do for that week should give you extra crests, like an extra however many crests, gilded. Or maybe it should just give you a better piece of gear. Not every single time. Just kind of like when you get the map or whatever, the bounty map, and then that next one gives you extra gear. Maybe just your first tier 11 gives you that or something like that, right? Your first tier 11 you do, I don't even know how you would do it. You can, I'm sure they have a million ways they could institute this. The first one you complete per week, you get a nice piece of loot, like or something that's already on the hero track, for example, right? And maybe it's even upgraded somewhat on the hero track, just from completing your first tier 11 delve. So you have something to shoot for. Maybe it can be fully upgraded from the hero track, right? So it's like a really powerful item, and you can make it random still, so people aren't trying to like abuse the system in any way. But these are just kind of my thoughts on it as well. Probably maybe one of my final thoughts would be maybe being able to target something with undercoin or whatever if they have a new currency for season 2. But the Delver's coin, maybe with enough of it being able to target certain pieces of loot that you would get from doing it or from your vault, right? Maybe you could work towards it. Maybe completing tier 11s gives you a token, for example, that combined with the coin you can buy a hero track piece as well. Like, so you get a hero track piece for your first one, but they also drop coins or whatever you want to make it do. And then you combine them, and then you can target loot as well. Because I do know my mage, I geared up my mage specifically so I have knowledge to talk about this stuff, only in delves. So he's like 612 or something like that. I could get him up higher, but I just didn't feel like using up all the crests and stuff that I had. I didn't feel like farming more crests. And me being me, I'm like, well, I could just go do some Mythic Plus and get these rune crests a heck of a lot faster. Or I could go do the heroic raid with my mage and go get these crests a heck of a lot faster. But I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do delve only. So you could definitely get your gear up there, but it was hard kind of filling out my last spots on my mage by doing it this way. So maybe some way to target as well. It doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be the best, but better rewards make the delves a little bit easier, especially the tier 11, tier 10, tier 9. Make them just slightly easier, not from an overall difficulty, just from like the bullcrap, the white hits, basically, right? And maybe the bosses not having the most fair mechanics in certain cases. In most cases, they are fair. Even if they're difficult for you, in most cases, they are fair. But there are a few that are a little bit unfair to certain specs and certain classes in the game. So I would highly suggest thinking about these things, because delves are already a success. Just like I got those comments of people saying tier 11s are too hard, I also got a bunch of comments saying delves are the reason why I'm even playing still, because delves, I can have good gear, I can feel powerful, I can go in the open world and be powerful, I have something to work for, progress my character. Delves are great. This is not a video hating on delves. It's just a video saying, hey, let's make delves a little bit cooler for anybody who's playing solo and anybody who's playing this way. So that's it for this one, guys. As always, I do ask you to please subscribe to the channel. If you're already subscribed to the channel, I encourage you to check out my Patreon. Other than that, everybody, have a good one.